If emotional, slow-burn stories about broken people quietly becoming a family move you, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next cinematic story on this channel. The stage was too small for the size of the logo behind it. A banner stretched across the back of the park pavilion. The words Rowan Properties Presents printed over a photo of smiling families. Under it, a portable sound system hummed, a local band tuned guitars. Kids ran past with balloons tied to their wrists. It was a gray autumn afternoon in North Haven. The river slid by, cold and quiet, just beyond the trees. Leaves rattled on branches, half gold, half gone. Caleb Rowan stood near the edge of the crowd in a dark coat, collar turned up. His assistant Tara hovered a step away, holding a tablet, checking times. "They want you near the stage for the check presentation," she murmured. 5 minutes, huh? He nodded without really listening. Community Day. On paper, it was a success. Free food, a pop-up health clinic, a petting zoo someone's cousin had arranged. The press would get photos. The Rowan Foundation would get a nice line in its annual report. Caleb was there because someone had to stand in front of the banner. He watched a child chase a balloon that had slipped from a wrist. A volunteer snagged the string, laughed, tied it back on. Laughter. Kids. The hum of a crowd that wasn't angry with him for once. His chest felt tight beneath the neat buttons of his shirt. "You okay?" Tara asked quietly. "Fine," he said. She followed his gaze. Near the edge of the lawn, a woman in a worn coat was adjusting the blanket over a small girl in a wheelchair. The chair's wheels were muddy, its frame clean but old. The girl's legs were strapped in place with soft braces. Her hair was pulled into two uneven pigtails, and she wore a paper crown someone had given her from the craft table. The woman, her mother, he assumed had the rigid kind of posture that came from habit, not dance training, but there was a certain grace in the way she moved, the way she crouched to the girl's eye level, the way she smiled even though fatigue haunted her eyes. He didn't know why he noticed that. "Caleb," Tara said, "they're ready." The MC's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing him with a string of titles: founder, CEO, philanthropist. He walked toward the stage. Phones lifted. People clapped politely. He stepped up, shook hands, accepted a giant check meant for a local clinic. Photographer snapped. He smiled on cue. After the photos, he moved down from the stage and into the milling crowd. He preferred the edges. Less performance there. Near the petting zoo, a volunteer had crouched in front of the little girl in the wheelchair. The girl's small hand rested on the back of a goat. Her eyes were bright. "You know who that is?" the volunteer said, pointing across the grass toward him. "That's the man who paid for all this. The billionaire. Imagine if he adopted you." It was a stupid joke, the kind people made when they didn't know better. The girl turned her head. Her gaze slid over the banner, the check, the expensive coat. Then it moved past him, landing on the woman struggling with a stack of folding chairs a few yards away. "Don't adopt me," the girl said, clear and calm. "Please adopt my mom." The words dropped into the air like something heavy. The volunteer's smile faltered. I didn't mean." The girl looked back at the goat, little fingers absently stroking its fur. Caleb felt his breath catch. He saw the woman straighten, a chair under each arm, as if she had heard but pretended she hadn't. He saw the way her jaw tightened, then relaxed. He saw, overlaid for a split second, someone else. His own mother's shoulders in a threadbare coat, a grocery bag in each hand. The slump of a woman tired down to the bone, but still trying to be enough. The image vanished, leaving him standing in a park full of people with a strange ringing in his ears. Caleb, Tara said softly, "We should head back to the car. You have a call with New York in half an hour." He didn't move. "What's the name of that building on Harbor Street?" he asked. Tara blinked. "Harbor Heights," she said. "The old low-income complex we own. It's on the redevelopment list." "Pull the tenant list," he said. "Find out who that woman is." Her brows rose, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." He watched the woman wrestle the chairs onto a cart. The little girl waved in his direction, a casual little flick of fingers. as if they were already slightly acquainted. He found himself lifting his hand in return. Then he turned away. The words, "Please adopt my mom," lodged somewhere deep, in a place he hadn't touched in years. Harbor Heights was as tired as he remembered. The 7-story brick building loomed over the street, fire escapes zigzagging up its side. The paint on the doors was peeling. The lobby smelled faintly of bleach and old cooking oil. A flickering fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. Caleb stepped inside and looked up the stairwell. He hadn't walked a building like this since he was in college, following his first mentor through hallways that smelled of boiled cabbage and cigarette smoke, learning how much money there was in buying places no one else wanted. His phone buzzed. Tara had texted him the name Mira Ellis. Apartment 1B, single mother, one child, Nova, tenant in good standing. A second text followed, a screenshot of a spreadsheet. Harbor Heights slated for full demolition and redevelopment. Projected profit margin highlighted in green. He slid the phone into his pocket and climbed the stairs. On the first floor landing, he nearly collided with the woman from the park. She was coming down, a laundry basket balanced on her hip. Nova perched on the top edge, arms wrapped around her neck. A bag of detergent dangled from her finger. Her hair was pulled into a low knot, a few strands escaping around her face. Up close, the effort in her shoulders was unmistakable. "Sorry," she said, breathless. "I didn't see." She adjusted her grip, and the basket tipped. A sweater tumbled out, followed by a small avalanche of tiny socks. Caleb reacted faster than he thought he could. "I've got it," he said, bending to catch the basket with one hand and scooping the sweater up with the other. Her eyes flicked to his face, recognition dawning. "You're from the park," she said. "The big check guy." He almost winced at the description. "Apparently," he said. "Caleb." She hesitated, then nodded. "Mira," she said. "This is Nova." Nova grinned. "I know you," she said. "You were behind the big piece of paper." "The check," he said. "Yeah, that was me." "You bought all the cotton candy," she added, as if that was more important to him. He found himself smiling. "Guilty," he said. Mira shifted the basket back into her arms, reclaiming its weight. "You don't have to be here," she said, half cautious, half curious. "Rich guys usually send people. They don't show up to broken stairs and flickering lights, and maybe I was in the neighborhood," he said. Her gaze dropped to his shoes, which were not made for neighborhoods like this. When she looked back up, there was a faint line between her brows. "Well," she said, "if you're going to be in the neighborhood, watch your step. The second floor landing has a board that likes to pretend it's solid and then isn't." He nodded. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. Nova craned her neck to look at him. "Did you hear what I said yesterday?" she asked. "About my mom?" Heat prickled at the back of his neck. "I did," he said. "Sorry," she added quickly. "I shouldn't have said adopt. Mom says people don't belong to people. But I don't want her to be alone." Mira made a soft sound, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "We're working on boundaries," she said. Caleb's chest tightened. I think it was a brave thing to say. He told Nova, "Sometimes the truth comes out sideways." Nova seemed satisfied with that. "We're going to miss wash time," she announced. "The machines get full." "Go," he said, stepping aside. Mira moved past him, careful on the worn steps. The laundry basket jostled. Nova's small hand clung to her shoulder. He watched them descend, the back of his throat suddenly dry. He thought of his mother hauling laundry up and down stairs that never got fixed, calling the super about a leaky pipe no one bothered to repair, lighting candles when the power cut out. He thought of the fire inspectors who hadn't come when neighbors complained about the wiring, of the night the alarm had failed. He swallowed hard. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched in two directions. He turned toward 1B, not ready to admit to himself why he had wanted to know which door was theirs. The wooden board at the second floor landing was, in fact, treacherous. He nearly went through it 2 days later. He'd come with a maintenance foreman in tow, an older man in a Rowan Properties jacket, the kind who had seen 100 buildings like this and knew their tricks. You see that, Caleb said, gesturing to the broken board after they caught their balance. Fix it today. And while you're at it, check the smoke alarms and the gas lines. All of them. The foreman frowned. We've been told not to put too much into Harbor Heights, he said carefully. Given it's slated for demo, Caleb's jaw clenched. Then consider this an exception, he said. If anything blows up before we get to knock it down, it'll be on me. And I'm not in the mood for that kind of déjà vu. The older man studied him for a beat, then nodded. Yes, Ma. Caleb stepped around the offending board. At the end of the hall, voices drifted from the community room, a small, unused space with mismatched chairs and a cracked mirror on one wall. It had been on the plans as a fitness center when the building went up decades ago. No one had used it for that in a long time. Until now, he paused at the doorway. The room was lit by a single high window. Sunlight angled in, slanting across the scuffed floor. Someone had dragged a flat wooden pallet into the center and covered it with a sheet of plywood, creating a makeshift platform. Mira stood on it in leggings and a faded t-shirt, one hand on the back of a chair, moving through a slow tendu. Her toes brushed the wood, pointed, drew back. Her back was straight, her neck long. The discipline of years on stage clung to every line. Nova sat cross-legged on the floor, clapping softly with each change in movement. A phone on a chair played piano from a tiny speaker. Again, Nova said. Do the spin again. Mira laughed, breathless. That's called a pirouette, she said. And we are not doing a full one on this floor unless you want to see your mother faceplant. You won't, Nova said. You're like the ballerina on my storybook. Those are drawings, Mira replied. They don't slip on dust. She tried anyway. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, out of sight. For a few minutes, he let himself watch. No one was performing for him. No one was pitching, pleading, or negotiating. There was just a woman reclaiming a small piece of herself on a wobbly platform in a building slated for erasure, and a child cheering as if it were the Bolshoi. Something in him softened and hurt at the same time. He wasn't sure when he'd forgotten that people lived in the spaces his company bought. Really lived. Laughed. Danced. Loved. He thought of spreadsheets. Of pro formas. Of the way Harbor Heights appeared on his office screen as a line item in an acquisition summary. Not as a place where a little girl asks strangers to adopt her mother. He stayed until the music ended, then backed away quietly, leaving them in that square of warm light. It started small, a new handrail on the stairs, a smoke detector that actually beeped when tested, a notice on the community board announcing free movement classes for kids in the old fitness room, taught by resident Mira Ellis, sponsored by the Rowan Foundation. Mira stared at the flyer when it appeared. You did this, she said later when she and Caleb found themselves in the hallway together again, this time with the smell of fresh paint in the air. He shrugged. Kids need somewhere to run around that isn't the parking lot, he said. And my lawyers like it when we can write off things as community programs. She snorted softly. You don't have to pretend it's all PR, she said. I saw you watching. He stiffened. I didn't want to interrupt, he said. You didn't, she replied. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me dancing like it was worth watching. So, thanks for that. And he didn't know what to do with the warmth that rose in his chest. You were good, he said. I mean, you are. She said. It's okay. You were right the first time. But I like having pieces of it back. Her eyes softened. And Nova loves it, she added. Having a class, having other kids around, feeling like she's part of something. That mattered more to him than he expected. He ended up in Harbor Heights more often after that. Sometimes he brought books for Nova. Sometimes he brought coffee for Mira after her shift at the cafe. Sometimes he just stood in the back of the makeshift studio, watching the kids stumble through clumsy arabesques while Mira clapped and encouraged. He didn't tell her who he was to this building. It never seemed like the right moment. But every time he walked back out onto the street, he felt the weight of that omission pressing between his shoulder blades. Harbor Heights is on the list. Vivian Hart dropped a folder onto the conference table and sat across from him, crossing one leg over the other. They were 40 floors above Manhattan, the city spread out beyond the glass. The conference room was all clean lines and chrome, a long table like a runway between them. Caleb flipped the folder open. Projected profit charts, architectural renderings, an email thread with an investment fund in London that wanted to sink hundreds of millions into Rowan's next wave of luxury developments. Demolition scheduled for 18 months out, Vivian said. We move tenants with a standard relocation package. We demolish. We build. We sell. The numbers are gorgeous. He stared at the columns of green, Harbor Heights, North Haven, the place where a little girl in a paper crown had asked him to adopt her mother. You've been after this fund for years, Vivian said. This is the door. They like Harbor Heights because it's symbolic. From Blight to Beacon, we secure this. We're not just regional players anymore. He closed the folder. What if we don't demolish, he asked. She blinked. Come again. What if we rehab in place, he said. New wiring, new plumbing, reinforce the structure, add an annex where the parking lot is, keep the current residents, add some mixed income units to support the numbers. Vivian's brows rose. We've had this conversation, she said, her tone careful. Retrofit costs more per unit. Investors hate it. They want clear before-after photos and clean margins. The fund already thinks we're soft because you insist on these community days. He flinched at the word soft. I know why you want this, she added, voice gentler. You grew up in buildings like Harbor. So did I. But the point of getting out was to have enough power that no one could ever tell us we couldn't leave. He thought of his mother, standing in a doorway that had been her world. The point, he said quietly, was to make sure no one else burned. She exhaled. Caleb, she said, your mother died in a fire because some slumlord cut corners. You are nothing like that man. You build real things, but you can't carry every tenant on your back. If we don't grow, people like him will. They'll buy Harbor Heights, and you know they won't think twice about bulldozing it. He knew she believed what she was saying. He also knew she hadn't seen Nova trying to wheel herself up the uneven ramp in the back, or the way Mira's face lit when a child nailed a simple step. I'm not saying no, he said. I'm saying there might be another way. She studied him for a long beat. Figure it out fast, she said at last. The fund wants a firm answer in 6 weeks. If we hesitate, they move on. After she left, he sat alone in the glass box high above the city, folder open in front of him, Harbor Heights a line and a table. In his mind, it was a hallway with a board that could swallow your foot if you stepped wrong. It was a community room with a makeshift stage. It was a little girl in a wheelchair clapping for her mother. He rubbed a hand over his face. He had built this machine. He wasn't sure he liked what it was asking him to be. The notice appeared on the bulletin board at Harbor Heights on a Tuesday, printed in official language. It announced that the building was undergoing evaluation for future improvements and that residents would be contacted individually regarding possible relocation options. Mira read it twice. Her fingers shook. She'd heard rumors. Of course. Some neighbor's cousin had said the building was on a list. But rumors were easy to file away under later, when your days were filled with shifts and stretches and teaching kids not to lock their knees. Paper with company letterhead was harder to ignore. She folded her arms across her chest, trying to keep her breathing even. At the cafe that afternoon, the small television above the counter showed muted news. An anchor talked about markets and mergers, a stock ticker crawling along the bottom. A photo of Caleb flashed on the screen. Real estate billionaire Caleb Rowan announced today that Rowan Properties is in advanced talks with an international investment fund, the anchor said. Sources close to the deal say Mira dropped the dish she'd been drying. It hit the floor with a dull clatter. Her coworker shot her a look. You good? She asked. Mira stared at the screen. Caleb in a suit. Caleb shaking hands with someone in front of a glossy rendering. Caleb at a ribbon cutting for a glass tower that probably cost more than everything in Harbor Heights combined. The same face that had leaned against her doorway, offering her coffee. The same face that had watched Nova's clumsy pirouettes with something like pride. Heat flushed through her, followed by a cold, hollow feeling. He hadn't lied to her. Not exactly. He just hadn't told the truth. That night, when he came by the community room, Nova squealed and wheeled over to him, waving a new drawing. "I made us a house," she said. "See, that's you. That's Mommy. That's me. We live there. There's a ramp and everything." He crouched, looking at the three stick figures under the triangle roof. The word home floated above in shaky letters. "It's beautiful," he said. Mira stood near the mirror, arms folded. He felt the distance before he saw it. "You okay?" he asked. She met his gaze in the reflection. "Did you know?" she asked. His stomach dropped. "Know what?" "About the notice," she said. "About Harbor Heights. About the evaluation for future improvements." He straightened. "I knew the building is on a redevelopment list," he said carefully. "But nothing's decided. There are options. I'm trying to—" "You're trying," she cut in. "While you sit in conference rooms talking about numbers, my neighbors start packing in their heads. Do you know what happens to families like ours when evaluation turns into bulldozers?" He swallowed. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Then why didn't you say something?" she asked. He had no good answer. "Because I thought I could fix it," he said. "I thought I could make it better before it became real. I didn't want to scare you." Her laugh was brittle. "You didn't want to scare me," she said. "So you let me put my kid in a class in the basement of a building that might not exist next year. You let her draw pictures of a house with you in it." Nova looked between them, confusion creasing her brow. "Mom," she whispered. Mira closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. "This isn't on you," she told Nova, voice softening. "You didn't do anything wrong." Then she looked back at Caleb. "But you did," she said. The words landed without raised voice, without drama. "They hurt more because of that." He reached toward her. "Mira," she stepped back. "I can't do this," she said. "I can't stand here and pretend you're just some guy who shows up with coffee. You're the man who holds the pen. You're the one who decides if my child has a home." He flinched. "I'm trying to decide right," he said. "I'm fighting for that." "Maybe," she said. "But I can't gamble my daughter's stability on your internal struggle." She turned away, the thin muscles of her back held rigid. For the first time since he'd walked into Harbor Heights, he left feeling like the air in the building was pressing him out. She didn't leave a note on his desk. She left it on the kitchen counter in apartment 1B. By the time he found it, the room was empty. The couch was gone. The small table by the window was bare. Only the imprint of furniture on the faded carpet said anyone had ever lived there. Sunlight pooled on the floor in long rectangles. He stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping in. The letter lay under a magnet on the fridge, held up with a drawing. The drawing was the house Nova had shown him. 3 figures under a roof, his stick hair messier than in real life. Mira's skirt twirling. Nova's wheelchair drawn with 2 big circles. He took the letter down with hands that didn't feel like his. "Caleb, thank you for the coffees, the fixed stare, the little stage. Thank you for the way you looked at my daughter like she was more than a diagnosis. I am grateful for every good thing you brought into our days. I wish the man who stood in my doorway and the man on the screen in that boardroom were the same person. Maybe they are, and I just met him in the middle of his change. Either way, I can't wait here to see which side wins." Nova needs stability more than she needs a maybe. She needs a mother who doesn't jump every time there's a new notice on the board. "So we are going to try to build a life somewhere you are not the one holding the lease. I hope you find a way to build homes that don't disappear under your own feet. And I hope you find a home that doesn't vanish when someone sees the whole of you. Mira." He read it twice. By the end of the second time, his vision blurred. He sank to the floor, back against the empty fridge, the letter in one hand and the drawing in the other. The silence in the room was different from the silence in boardrooms and penthouses. It was the kind that echoed. He thought of another empty apartment. Long ago, soot on the ceiling, a broken window, a burn mark where a life had gone out. He had spent years building towers so high he could pretend that night lived somewhere beneath his feet, manageable, contained. Now he sat on worn carpet in a building with his name on the deed, and it felt like the ground was gone. He pressed the heel of his hand to his chest, as if he could steady something there. He had never promised Mira anything, But his silence had been its own kind of lie. The boardroom was as bright and cold as ever. Screens lit the wall with charts and graphs. The investment fund's representative beamed in from London, his face crisp and confident. "This is an unprecedented opportunity," he said. "We bring capital. You bring local expertise. Together we transform underperforming assets into high-yield properties. Harbor Heights is your pilot. Do it right, and we replicate it across the region." Vivian sat to Caleb's right, a pen in her hand, her eyes on him. The rest of the board was a mix of curiosity and hunger. Caleb looked at the presentation again. Renderings of gleaming glass, rooftop gardens, a gym. A tagline floated under one slide from broken to beautiful. He thought of Harbor Heights' cracked mirror and Mira's bare feet on the makeshift stage. "What happens to the current residents under this plan?" he asked. The fund representative smiled. "They're offered relocation assistance," he said. "Standard industry practice. A generous package, I might add." To where Caleb pressed, the man blinked. "Wherever they choose," he said, a little less smooth. "Within reason." Within reason. Within whatever radius made the spreadsheet balance. He saw his mother's handwriting on a faded lease, the letter she'd sent to the landlord, pleading for repairs, for safety. He heard Nova say, "Don't adopt me. Please adopt my mom." Caleb Vivian murmured, "We need a yes or a no." He realized he was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles ached. If he said yes, Rowan Properties would explode in size. They'd have access to capital he'd only dreamed of. He could argue that with more influence, he could do more good. If he said no, the fund would walk. The board would be furious. He could lose his position. Another CEO might take the deal anyway, without qualms. He stared at the Harbor Heights slide. At some point, he had started thinking of buildings as numbers, as product. But right now, all he saw were faces. "All right," he said. Relief flickered over the representative's face. "Excellent. I'm not signing," Caleb said. The room went very quiet. The man on the screen blinked, as if the connection had dipped. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not signing this deal," Caleb repeated. "Not under these terms. Not if Harbor Heights is a test case for evicting people who have nowhere else to go." One of the board members leaned forward. "Caleb, be reasonable," she said. "This is business. You can't let one building derail." "It's not one building," he cut in. "It's all of them. It's every place we've called an underperforming asset when what we meant was full of people who don't fit the brochure." Vivian's gaze was sharp. "What are you saying?" she asked. "I'm saying Rowan Properties is changing," he said. "We are not going to be the kind of company that burns down people's lives for prettier margins." A low murmur rippled around the table. "You don't get to make that decision unilaterally," one of the older board members said. "We have a fiduciary responsibility." "I know," he said, "which is why I'm proposing a restructure." He drew a breath. "I'll step down as day-to-day CEO," he said. "We bring in someone who can run the profitable parts of the portfolio in a way that keeps you all happy. I move upstairs as executive chairman and take full control of a new division, a foundation that handles our community projects and our legacy properties. Harbor Heights goes there, so do any buildings like it. We rehab in place. We develop mixed income models. We prove we can make money without throwing people out." He saw Vivian's lips part. "Do you know what you're sacrificing?" she asked. "Yes," he said. He was sacrificing the illusion that he could have it both ways. The representative from the fund frowned. "This is highly irregular," he said. "Without Harbor Heights as a flagship, then we wish you the best with your other partners," Caleb said. He might be walking away from more money than his mother had ever imagined existing, but if he signed, he'd be walking away from himself. Silence stretched. "At last," the chairwoman sighed. "You realize the stock will take a hit," she said. "I do," he said. "And that you're painting a target on your back," she added. "I can live with that," he replied. He looked at Vivian. Her eyes were stormy. Hurt flickered there, and something like reluctant respect. "You're really going to do it," she said. "Yes," he said. She exhaled through her nose. "Then for what it's worth," she said, "if you're going to jump, You might as well try to land somewhere worth standing. He nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't war. The meeting ended with more questions than answers. Caleb walked out with a half-empty briefcase and the drawing of a house folded carefully in the inside pocket of his jacket. He had no idea how he was going to pull off the model he'd just proposed. He only knew that he couldn't keep using his mother's death as a reason to justify hurting people like her. Finding Mira took longer than he liked. He started with the obvious. He checked forwarding addresses. None. He asked neighbors. A shrug, a guess about a relative in another city, a mention of a flyer someone had seen at a downtown community center. He asked the rehab clinic where Nova had gone on Tuesdays for physical therapy. They couldn't give him information, but they could pass a message. He left one, then another, then stopped, realizing he had no right to demand a response. Weeks passed. Harbor Heights moved into the foundation's portfolio. Engineers drew up retrofit plans. Architects argued about where to put ramps and elevators. Community meetings were scheduled. He flew more than he slept. Between flights, he checked his email. One evening, in yet another bland hotel room, Tara forwarded him a photo. Subject, you might want to see this. The image was of a bulletin board in a small lobby. A flyer hung in the center. Ballet for all bodies, it read. Classes by Mira Ellis. Below was a photo. Mira standing in a bright room, her hair pulled back, her posture still dancer straight, surrounded by a circle of kids in various states of balance. Some stood on their own. One held a walker, another leaned on parallel bars. In the center, sitting on a low stool, smiling like she'd just been told the best secret in the world, was Nova. Caleb stared at the image until his eyes blurred. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, he booked a flight. The community center sat on the edge of a different city, brick and glass tucked between a school and a row of modest houses. A mural on its side showed kids playing on a hill, arms outstretched, and Caleb stood on the sidewalk across the street and watched people go in and out. His heart hammered harder than it had in any board presentation. Through the large front window, he could see a room with a high ceiling and a floor of pale wood. Mirrors lined one wall. A bar ran along another. A class was in session. Mira moved among a small group of children, gentle hands correcting elbows, guiding knees. Her voice, though muffled through the glass, carried a rhythm that his bones recognized even if he didn't know the terms. Nova stood between two parallel bars, legs braced, hands gripping the rails. Her braces were newer, sleeker. A metal walker waited nearby. One of the other kids clapped a beat. 1, they counted. 2, 3. Nova lifted one foot. It wobbled, then found the floor a few inches forward. Her arms shook from effort. She set the foot down. The room erupted in cheers. Mira laughed, eyes shining. That's enough for today, she said. We listen to our bodies. We celebrate what they did, not what they didn't yet. Caleb felt something sting behind his eyes. He stayed on the sidewalk until the class ended. When the kids spilled out, chattering, a few glanced at him, curious. Nova came out last, pushing her walker, Mira at her side. For a moment, they didn't see him. Then Nova's head turned. Her face lit up. Mr. Caleb, she yelled. She let go of the walker with one hand and waved so hard she nearly toppled. Mira caught the handles. Caleb's feet moved before his mind did. He crossed the street. Nova rolled toward him as fast as her arms could manage. He dropped to one knee on the concrete. She barreled into him, arms thrown around his neck. You disappeared, she said into his shoulder. Mom said grown-ups do that sometimes. Like magic, but stupid. He let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. She's smarter than I am, he said. I deserve that. Mira approached more slowly. Her eyes took in his suit, his tired face, the way he was kneeling on a sidewalk without looking at the dirt. Hi, he said when he could tear his gaze from Nova. Hi, she replied. The word carried a world of questions. He gathered Nova's hands in his. He remembered the park, the goat, the paper crown. Do you remember what you told that volunteer, he asked? At the community day in North Haven, Nova scrunched her nose, thinking. That I didn't want to be adopted, she said. That I wanted my mom to be. He nodded. You said, Don't adopt me. Please adopt my mom, he reminded her. It was the bravest thing I'd heard in a long time. She ducked her head, suddenly shy. Was it bad, she asked. No, he said. It was honest. He swallowed. His heart pounded hard enough that he could hear it in his ears. Nova, he said, I messed up. I didn't tell you and your mom the whole truth. I thought I could fix things in secret and then surprise you with the good parts. It doesn't work that way. She studied his face, serious. Mom cried, she said quietly. After we left, she tried to do it in the bathroom, but I heard I was mad at you. You had every right to be, he said. He glanced up at Mira. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed loosely, as if holding herself together. I can't change that I hurt you, he told Nova. I can only decide what I do next. He took a slow breath. Harbor Heights isn't being demolished, he said. We're keeping it. We're fixing it. We're making sure people like you and your mom have the option to stay in homes that don't fall apart under them. Nova's eyes widened. Really, she whispered. Really? He said. He looked at Mira. I walked away from a very big pile of money to make that true, he added. I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying it because I want you both to know I chose. Mira's jaw worked. What happens to you, she asked. In your world, your company. I'm still there, he said, just in a different seat. I won't pretend there wasn't a cost, but I won't ask any more families to pay it for me. Nova's grip on his hands tightened. Why are you telling me, she asked. Because the first time, I didn't tell you anything, he said, and it hurt you. If I ever want to be part of your family, I don't get to hide the hard parts. He felt the words leave him and realized how true they were. He let go of one of Nova's hands and placed his palm flat against his own chest. Nova Ellis, he said, if you still want your mom to be adopted, if you still think I could belong with you, I would be honored if you'd let me try. Not as a charity, not as a rescuer, just as a man who loves both of you and is trying to learn how to stay. The sidewalk, the street, the front of the community center, all of it held its breath. Nova looked at him, then at her mother. Mom, she whispered. Mira's eyes shone with unshed tears. I'm listening too, she said. What do you think? Nova frowned. Considering with the seriousness of a judge, he made you coffee, she said slowly. And he fixed the stairs. And he made the paper people stop being mean to our building. And you smile when you say his name, even when you're mad. Mira let out a sound that was almost a laugh. That last one is classified, she said. Nova looked back at Caleb. Are you going to stay, she asked. Or are you going to disappear again when your phone rings? Her bluntness cut cleaner than any adult's accusation. He didn't look away. I'm going to try very hard to stay, he said. I might mess up. I might get scared. But I promise I won't disappear without talking to you first. She thought about that. Okay, she said at last. She held out a small hand. You can adopt my mom, she said, and me, but not like dolls. Like we all put our names in the same house. His throat closed. I can work with that, he whispered. He shook her hand solemnly, then looked up at Mira. She stepped closer. You changed Harbor Heights, she said. You shifted an entire company. I checked. I have friends who read business news now. He huffed out a breath. You, what? She shrugged. You became homework, she said. I wasn't going to let someone back into my life without seeing if they only changed for me or for the people I left behind. And your conclusion, he asked, quietly terrified. She looked at Nova, at the community center, at him kneeling on the sidewalk. You changed for you, she said, for your mother, for every Mira and Nova who never learn your name. That matters. She took a step closer. But if you want to change with us, she added, there are conditions. He almost smiled. Of course there are, he said. Name them. You show up, she said, not just for the big speeches, for therapy appointments, for bad days, for nights when Nova has nightmares or when I do. You don't get to drown in work every time something feels hard. He nodded. Agreed, he said. You tell the truth. she continued. Even when it makes you look less impressive. He flinched, then nodded again. And she said, softer now, you let us be enough. You don't try to buy your way out of guilt with grand gestures when what we really need is someone to do the dishes. He swallowed around a lump in his throat. I can learn dishes, he said. Nova giggled. Mom hates dishes. She said, we can make him do all of them. Mira smiled, the kind of small, real smile he hadn't seen since before the notice went up on the Harbor Heights board. Then maybe we have a starting point, she said. He stood slowly, his knees protesting. Nova grabbed his hand and shoved it toward her mother. Hold hands, she commanded. That's how families cross streets. And he took Mira's hand. It was warm, calloused in places, slender. It fit in his like it had been there before. They crossed the street together, three figures moving toward the car, towards some shape of life none of them had fully imagined. The wedding wasn't big. They didn't want it to be. It was held on a quiet beach a few hours' drive from North Haven, where the sand was pale and the waves gentle. Friends from Harbor Heights came, some from the community center, a few board members who had stayed after the restructure. Vivian sent flowers and a short, dry note. Try not to burn the place down. Mira wore a simple dress that moved when the wind did. Caleb wore no tie. The officiant stood barefoot in the sand, a thin folder of vows in her hand. Nova wore a pale dress with a shimmer to it in a crown of small flowers. Her walker had ribbons on its handles. The braces on her legs were painted with tiny stars. Before the ceremony, she stood next to Mira, fingers clenched on the walker. I want to walk some, she whispered. Mira crouched to her level. You already walk some, she said. Every day. You don't have to prove anything here. I know, Nova said. I want to walk toward you and him, like in the movies, but not fake. Mira's eyes filled. We'll go as far as your body says. Okay, she said. No more. If it's 2 steps, it's 2. If it's if you decide halfway you want your chair, we get your chair. Deal? Deal, Nova said. The guests settled into folding chairs sunk a little into the sand. The music, mostly just a speaker playing a piano piece, started. Mira walked down first, barefoot, the hem of her dress brushing the water's edge. Caleb waited near the officiant, feet planted, heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with stage fright and everything to do with the 2 people walking toward him. Then came Nova. She gripped her walker, arms straight, chest rising and falling fast. The sand made the wheels drag. Each step was work. 1, her right foot moved forward, brace glinting. 2, her left foot followed. The walker wobbled. She paused, taking a breath. 3, she glanced up, saw both of them watching her mother, eyes shining, and Caleb, hands half raised as if ready to catch her, but trying not to hover. She smiled, determined. 4, the next step was smaller. The wheel sunk into a soft patch. Her arms shook. Mira started toward her. Nova shook her head. No, she said, teeth clenched. I've got it. The guests held their breath. 5. She pushed past the soft spot, reached the firmer sand, and got within an arm's reach of them. Her legs trembled. That's enough, Mira said, voice thick. Caleb moved forward, hands gentle on the walker, taking some of the weight. You did it, he said. Nova looked down at her feet in the sand, then up at the waves. I did some, she corrected. We'll do more later. That's how it goes. He laughed, choked. Yeah, he said, that's how it goes. They centered themselves before the officiant, Nova between them, one hand on each of theirs. The woman opened her folder. Caleb, she said, do you have vows you'd like to share? He took a breath. I don't have the right words for all the ways I've failed, he said, but I know them. And I know this: every decision I made for most of my life answered the question, how do I never feel helpless again? He looked at Mira, at Nova. It made me powerful, he said, but it didn't make me home. You 2 did that. The wind picked up his words and carried them toward the water. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, he continued. I can't promise I'll never be afraid. But I promise that every choice I make from now on, in my company or in my kitchen, has to answer a new question. Does this make life better for the two people holding my hand? If the answer is no, I don't sign, I don't build, I don't go. He swallowed. I don't just adopt a building in North Haven, he said. I adopt a family that taught me what that word really means. Mira's shoulders shook. Nova looked up at him, eyes wide. My turn, Mira said. She wiped at her cheeks. I spent a long time thinking my job was to survive, she said. To keep this small person fed and clothed and laughing. Anything else felt like dangerous wishes. She squeezed Nova's hand. Then a man showed up in my hallway with coffee and fixed Soafair stairs, she said. He also brought risk. He made me hope. And he made mistakes that hurt. She met Caleb's gaze. I don't need perfection, she said. I need presence. I need someone who will do the dishes and sign the hard papers and sit with us when the night feels heavy. She inhaled, slow and steady. So my vow is this, she said. I will tell you the truth, even when it is ugly. I will ask for help instead of pretending I can carry everything alone. And I will let you be loved, not because of what you build, but because of who you are when the building falls quiet. Nova tugged both their hands. What about me? She asked. Do I say something? The officiant smiled. If you want, she said. Nova thought hard. I promise to try new steps, she said. On the floor, with my legs, with my heart. And when any of us fall, I promise we all sit on the ground for a little bit together before we stand up again. There was a soft sound from the chairs. Someone sniffled. Someone laughed through tears. The officiant blinked away her own dampness. Well, she said, with vows like that, I think we're done. She said the formal words. Pronounce them a family. Caleb kissed Mira under a sky streaked with late afternoon light. Nova covered her eyes part way, peeking through her fingers. Waves rolled in, lapped at their feet, then retreated. Later, when the sun dipped lower and the guests drifted toward blankets and picnic tables, the three of them stood at the water's edge. Behind them, Harbor Heights was being gutted and rebuilt, not erased. Other buildings were on lists, not for demolition, but for repair. There were still fights ahead, board meetings, lawsuits, hard days in therapy, nights of doubt. But here, now, the sand was cool under their feet. The air smelled of salt and possibility. Nova slipped her hands into theirs. Want to see how many steps I can do? She asked. Only if we get to do them with you, Caleb said. She grinned. Okay, she said. Then we all go. Together. They did. 3 uneven, determined lines in the sand, 3 shadows stretching long toward the water. A family that hadn't existed a year ago, walking into a future that wasn't promised, but was, for the first time, chosen.